Picture a small castle in the green folds of Kent, a moat the colour of weak tea, swans on it, a drawbridge that groans when it comes down. Now fill the castle with linen, shifts, sheets, napkins, smocks. The small cloths women wear against their bodies once a month. The pillow slips a man sweats into when he is afraid. Add a father who keeps accounts in his head the way other men keep prayers. Add 2 daughters. Add a king who is 31 years old, 6 feet 2, and has never in his life been told no by anyone who kept their position afterward. That is Hever in the year 1522. Beautiful from the road, quiet inside. A house where nobody says the most important thing and everybody knows it. A place where the family motto is about being happy and the linen tells a different story. We're going back there tonight. Not as tourists walking through the rooms with a guidebook, looking at the bed Anne Boleyn may or may not have slept in. We're going below stairs, into the washhouse and the drying loft, into the hands of the girl who washed what the Boleyns wore. One girl, 14 years of a family, everything she scrubbed, smelled, carried, and was told never to notice. I make these stories, and I still don't know whether you actually sleep to them, or whether you are simply the kind of person who finds it restful to hear about lye burns and Tudor bloodstains. Either way, subscribe if you like, get comfortable, here we go. The shift is stained, and you're not allowed to know what the stain means. It is lying on the stone slab in front of you, folded once, a woman's linen shift of a fineness you will never wear. The seams so small they look like scratches, and just below the waist there is a brown mark the size of your palm that came from a body and not from food. You know exactly what kind of stain it is. You've been washing women's linen since you were 9. You know the difference between a stain that means a woman's month has come and a stain that means it has come too late, or too hard, or has come in a way that frightened her enough that she did not rinse the shift herself in the basin the way ladies usually do, and simply pushed it into the basket for the laundress to find. This is that kind of stain, and the shift belongs to Mistress Mary Carey, who was Mary Boleyn, who is the eldest daughter of this house, and who is married to a gentleman of the king's privy chamber, and who has been, for a year now, the king's. Everyone at Hever knows it. Nobody at Hever says it, and you have just been handed a piece of cloth that says it for them. Your name is Nan Gaia. You are 15. You came to Hever 3 years ago from Edenbridge, 2 miles down the river, because your mother did washing for the Astors at the mill, and Mistress Joan, who rules the Hever washhouse, needed a girl with strong wrists and no opinions. You have the wrists. You are working on the rest. Your hands are red to the elbow this morning, because it is a Monday in March, and Monday is lie day, and the lie has been eating you since the bell. Ash and water, left to stand, poured off. The liquid so sharp it makes your eyes run from 3 feet away. You've been kneading heavy sheets in it in a wooden trough since before it was properly light, and the skin at your knuckles has gone white and cracked, and the cracks have started to weep. Later, they will bleed. That is Monday. You do not think about Monday. You think about the shift. Mistress Joan is across the washhouse with her back to you, wringing a tablecloth with the boy Hal on the other end, the two of them twisting in opposite directions until the cloth goes hard as a rope and the water runs out in a grey stream across the flags. She has not seen the shift, or she has and is waiting to see what you do with it. You do the only thing you can think of. You lift it by the shoulders so the stain hangs down and away. You carry it to the cold trough at the far end, the one nobody uses for anything but blood, and you push it under, and you hold it there with both hands flat on the cloth as though you are holding a face under water. The cold bites straight through the cracks in your knuckles. You do not let go. Cold first. Always cold first for blood. Hot water cooks it into the weave and it never comes out. Every laundress in England knows that. Every girl who's ever washed a shift. You stand there with your hands in the trough and the cold climbing up your forearms, and you look at the wall where there is nothing to look at, and you try to make your face into the kind of face that has never seen anything. 'Cause here is the first thing you learned at Hever, before you learned how to starch a partlet or fold a sheet so it lies flat in the press. You learned that in this house the linen does the talking. The Boleyns do not say things out loud. Sir Thomas does not say that his daughter is the king's mistress. Lady Elizabeth does not say it. Mistress Mary does not say it. Her husband, Master Carey, who is a kind, ordinary, slightly foolish man who likes hawking and calls you Nan when he remembers you exist, certainly does not say it. Nobody says it. But the shifts come back from court in the panniers every fortnight smelling of a musk that Mistress Mary does not own, and the sheets come back from the guest chamber in the west wing with the imprint of a man who lies diagonally, and the napkins come back from the private supper in the long gallery with wine that is not the wine Sir Thomas serves, and you wash all of it, and you know all of it, and if you ever said one word, you would be back in Edenbridge by nightfall with no character, and your mother's face turned to the wall. That is the arrangement. That is the whole house. Everybody's hands doing something and everybody's mouth shut. Cold trough, Mistress Joan says, not turning round. Good. That is all. She saw. She always sees. You lift the shift out. The stain has gone from brown to pink, and the pink is spreading into the water in a thin cloud. You wring it gently, not hard, because fine linen tears if you treat it like a sheet, and you lay it over your arm, and you feel the weight of it, which is almost nothing, which is the weight of a thing that costs more than you earn in a year. Salt, Mistress Joan says. Then leave it in the sun if there's sun. Don't put it through the lye with the rest. Yes, mistress. And Nan, you wait. That's a shift, nothing else. A shift with a mark on it. You've seen 100. Yes, mistress. She still hasn't turned round. Hal, on the other end of the tablecloth, is staring at you with his mouth open, because Hal is 11 and has not yet learned that his mouth is the most dangerous thing he owns. Mistress Joan gives the cloth one more twist, and it goes hard as timber between them. And Hal yelps and lets go, and it slaps against the flags, and she says without heat, "Pick it up and stop looking at Nan." And he picks it up. You take the shift out into the yard. The yard is the inner court of the castle, small, square, enclosed on 4 sides, so the sun only reaches the floor of it for a few hours in the middle of the day. The stone underfoot is wet because everything at Hever is wet. The moat seeps up into the ground, and the ground seeps up into the walls, and the walls sweat all winter and half the spring. The air smells of the moat, green and still, and of wood smoke from the kitchen, and of the horses in the stable yard beyond the gatehouse, and faintly of the privies that empty into the moat on the north side, which everybody pretends is a different moat from the one the swans are on. You lay the shift on the drying hedge. The low hawthorn Mistress Joan keeps clipped flat for exactly this, and you sprinkle the salt from the crock at your belt onto the pink cloud where the stain was, and you press it in with the heel of your hand, and you feel the tiny grains grinding against the weave. And then, because you are 15, and because you cannot help it, you look up. The windows of the west wing look down into the court. The middle one, the one with the small panes of new glass that Sir Thomas paid for last year, is Mistress Mary's when she's at Hever. She's at Hever this week. She came down from court in a litter 6 days ago with her face the colour of tallow, and she's not come out of that room since except to go to chapel, and she's eaten according to the kitchen almost nothing. There is a shape at the window, standing very still, looking down at the yard, at you, at the shift on the hedge with the salt on it. You drop your eyes to the cloth so fast your neck hurts. That is the second thing you learned at Hever. You do not look at them. They can look at you as long as they like, and they do, sometimes, with an expression you cannot read, as though you were a chair they were thinking of moving. But you do not look back. The whole house runs on that, on one set of eyes going down while the other set goes wherever it wants. When you look up again, the window is empty. Sir Thomas Boleyn is a man who counts. You will spend 14 years in his house, and that is the thing you will remember about him after everything else has faded. He counts. Not out loud, not on his fingers. Behind his face, you can see him do it. He looks at a thing, a horse, a roll of cloth, a letter, a person, and something in the back of his eyes goes click, 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 and then he knows what it is worth, and after that he never has to look at it properly again. He's 45 this year. Lean, quick, dark-haired, going grey at the sides, with a narrow mouth and beautiful hands that he keeps very clean, which you know because you wash the linen he wipes them on. He speaks French like a Frenchman and Latin like a priest, and he has been ambassador to the Emperor's aunt in the Netherlands and to the King of France, and he came back from both with gifts and debts and more polish than any man in Kent. He is treasurer of the king's household now. He goes up to court and comes back and goes up again. When he is at Hever, the house goes quiet in a particular way, like a room full of people trying not to breathe on something. His wife is a Howard, which matters more than anything he is himself. Lady Elizabeth, the Duke of Norfolk's sister, tall and silent and grand. A woman who moves through the house as though she were being carried. She does not count the way he does. She does not need to. She was born already knowing what everything was worth. And then there are the children. George, the son, the heir, a lean bright boy of 19 with his father's mouth and his mother's blood, who is at court now and rarely at Hever, and who leaves his shirts in a state that makes Mistress Joan swear in a language you think is Flemish. Anne, the younger daughter, who has been in France for 7 years since she was 12, in the household of the French Queen, and whom you have never seen, and who is expected home any month, because there has been a war, and English girls are being sent back across the water. And Mary who is at the window, Mary who is 22 or 23, nobody is quite sure, the birth order of the Boleyn girls being one of the many things the family does not discuss. Mary who went to France before Anne, as a maid to the king's sister when she married the old French king, and who came back after the old king died, and about whom the French, according to the grooms, say things that make the grooms laugh into their hands. Mary, who was married 2 years ago in the king's own chapel at Greenwich, to William Carey, a pleasant gentleman with no money, with the king himself standing as witness and giving a gift of 6 shillings and 8 pence, which is the sum you would give to a chaplain for a sung mass. Mary, whose husband was given this last year a manor, and then another manor, and then the keeping of a park, and then a share in the customs of a town, one after another, like a man being paid off in instalments. Mary, whose shift you have just salted. You know all of this. You are 15, and you cannot read, and you have never been further from Edenbridge than Tonbridge, and you know all of this, because you stand in the wash-house 6 days a week, with your hands in other people's dirt, and the house tells you everything it will not tell itself. What you do not know yet, standing in the wet court with the salt grinding under your palm, is that this is only the first daughter. Mistress Joan Sherborne has run the Hever wash-house since before Sir Thomas inherited the place from his father. She's somewhere past 50. She's short and wide, and moves like a barrel rolling downhill, and her forearms are the strongest thing you've ever seen on a woman, corded and brown and marked all over with the white shine of old lye burns, so many that the skin looks like the inside of an oyster shell. Her hands are ruined. Her fingers do not straighten any more. She holds a cloth with them the way a bird holds a branch, but she can wring a sheet drier than any 2 men in the house, and she can look at a stain from across the room and tell you what made it, and whether it will come out. And she has never, in the whole time you have known her, said one word about anyone in the family that could not have been said to their face in chapel. She taught you the lie. She taught you the cold trough. She taught you the difference between the smell of a sheet a sick person sweated into, and a sheet a frightened person sweated into, which are not the same, and which she says you must learn because someday it will matter. And on your first week at Hever, when you were 12 and had cried yourself to sleep 3 nights running because the loft was cold and Hal snored and you missed your mother's hand on your back, she sat down on the end of your pallet in the dark and said this: "You'll see things. You're a wash girl. You see the underneath of everything. That's the trade. And you'll want to say what you see because you're young and it feels like it's burning a hole in you. Here's what you do with it. You put it in the trough with the linen, you scrub it, you wring it, you hang it out, and when it's dry, it's just a sheet, and you fold it, and you put it in the press, and you never look at it again. You didn't understand her. You thought she meant the actual sheets. You understand her now. Because here is what you do with Mistress Mary's shift in the days after the salt. You rinse it. You dry it. When the sun comes, which it does on the Thursday, you lay it on the grass beyond the moat where the light is best, and you watch it for an hour so the geese do not walk on it, and the pink fades to a faint shadow, and then to nothing. You bring it in. You starch nothing on it because a shift is not starched. You fold it in 3 the way a lady's woman would fold it, and you lay it in the basket for the west wing with the rest of Mistress Mary's things, and you carry the basket up the stair yourself, because Hal is not allowed in the family wing. The stair is narrow and stone and turns twice. Your basket is heavy with linen and your arms ache from wringing, and there is a burn on your left wrist from the copper this morning that has begun to blister. You go up sideways. You reach the door of the outer chamber and you scratch on it. Because you do not knock at Hever, you scratch like a cat and wait. Mistress Mary's woman opens it, a sharp, thin creature from Norfolk named Bess, who came with the marriage, and she takes the basket from you at the threshold without a word, because you do not go into the chamber. You go as far as the door. But the door is open, and beyond Bess's shoulder there is the room, and in the room, by the window, there is Mistress Mary. She is sitting very straight in a chair. She's wearing a gown of tawny velvet that is too warm for the day, and her hair is dressed and her face is painted, and she looks, from the doorway, like a lady sitting in a chair. Only her hands are wrong. They are in her lap, one gripping the other, so hard that the knuckles of the top one have gone the same white as yours do in the lie. She turns her head and looks at you. You have never been this close to her face. She is pretty. Everyone says so. in the way people say it about Mary, which is a slightly different way from how they say it about other women, a way with a shrug in it. Round, soft, fair, a mouth made for smiling that is not smiling. Her eyes are red at the rims under the paint. She looks at the basket in Bess's arms, and she looks at you, and you know she knows which of her shifts is in it. Nobody says anything. Then Bess shuts the door in your face, and you stand on the landing with your empty arms and your blistered wrist, and you think, for the first time and not the last, that is what it looks like. Not the king's mistress, not the woman the grooms laugh about. That is what it looks like, being the thing this house is built on. You go back down the stair. You go back to the trough. Monday again. You do not say a word. Anne Boleyn comes home in the wet end of April, in a litter that has come from Dover with mud to the axles, and the whole house lines up in the court to receive her, and you're at the very back behind the kitchen women, with your hands folded in front of your apron to hide the burns. You expected another Mary, a softer one maybe, a younger one. That is what you had built in your head from 3 years of overhearing. The second daughter, the one in France. What gets out of the litter is something else entirely. She is thin and dark and not tall, and she's not pretty in the way Mary is pretty, not round or fair or soft anywhere. She has a long neck and a long face and a wide mouth and eyes so black that from the back of the court they look like holes. She's wearing a French hood, the small round kind that shows the hair, which no woman in Kent wears, and a gown of a cut you've never seen, close at the sleeve, and she steps down from the litter into the mud of the court as though the mud had been laid there for her convenience. She does not look at the household. She looks at the house, up at the gatehouse, along the west wing, across the roofs. Click, click, click. Her father's eyes. Then she turns to Sir Thomas, who's come down the steps to meet her, and she curtsies, low, perfect, and he raises her, and they kiss, and she says something in French that makes him laugh out loud, which you've heard him do perhaps 3 times in 3 years. Lady Elizabeth embraces her. George, who has ridden down from court for it, swings her off her feet, and she smacks him on the shoulder and calls him something in French that makes the grooms grin without knowing why. And Mistress Mary comes down the steps last, slowly, in the tawny gown, and the sisters look at each other for a moment across the mud. You cannot see Anne's face. You can see Mary's. It does something you cannot name. Then it smooths, and she steps forward and embraces her sister, and Anne embraces her back, and everybody in the court breathes out, and Mistress Joan says, low at your shoulder, that one's going to make work, and turns and goes back into the wash-house, and you follow her, because the linen does not wash itself. You're wrong about what she meant by work. You think she means the French gowns, the hoods, the new starching. She does mean that. Anne Boleyn's linen is a trial from the first week. The seams too fine, the sleeves too tight to turn, the cuffs edged in a black stitching that runs if you so much as breathe lie near it. But that is not the work she meant. The work she meant does not start for another 4 years, and when it does, it will not be a stain on a shift. It will be the King of England riding under the gatehouse with 12 gentlemen at his back and asking, in a loud, cheerful, carrying voice that fills the whole court, whether Lady Anne is and whether she will come down. And you, standing in the wash-house door with your hands wet, will look up at the west wing windows, and you will see Mistress Mary's face at one of them, and it will not be Mary's window any more. Before that, though, there are 4 years. And in those 4 years you learn the house the way you learn a body you have to wash. Every fold, every place it hides things. You learn that the wash-house day begins at 4 in winter and 3:30 in summer, when Mistress Joan puts her ruined hand on your shoulder in the dark of the loft and shakes once. You learn to roll off the pallet before your eyes are open, to find your clogs by feel, to go down the ladder backwards with your skirt bunched in one fist. You learn that the first job is always the fire under the copper, because the copper holds 60 gallons and takes 2 hours to come to heat, and if it is not boiling by the time the sheets come down from the chambers, the whole day slides backwards and nothing dries. The copper is a great round pot of beaten metal set in a brick jacket with a firebox underneath, and the boy Hal's job is to carry the water for it. 20 buckets from the well by the kitchen door, and your job is to make the fire, on your knees on the wet brick with a handful of dry twigs and a tinder box that never catches on the first strike or the second. The flint bites your thumb. The steel is cold. The sparks fall and die on the tinder, and you lean in and blow, gently, gently, and your breath comes back at you smelling of last night's pottage. And then there is a glow, and then a thread of smoke, and then you feed it twig by twig, and then split wood, and then the fat logs, and the heat comes up into your face, and the front of your body warms while your back stays cold, and that is how you will spend most of your life, one side warm and one side cold. You learn that the water in the copper is soft, because Hever draws from a well and not the river, and that soft water is a mercy, because hard water turns soap to curds and leaves a scum on the linen that nothing shifts. You learn to make the soap yourself in the autumn, from the kitchen's fat and Mistress Joan's lye, boiled together in the small copper for a day until it thickens and can be poured into wooden boxes to set. It stinks like a tannery while it cooks. Your eyes run. Your hair smells of it for a week. But it is your soap, and you know what is in it. And Mistress Joan says a laundress who buys her soap is a laundress who's given up. You learn the weight of things. A wet sheet, a good linen sheet from the family chambers, weighs as much as a small child, and you carry it in your arms across the wash-house to the wringing post, and the water runs down the front of your apron and into your shoes. A wet gown, on the rare occasions a gown must be washed rather than brushed, is a dead body. You cannot lift it alone. You and Mistress Joan take an end each and walk it, dripping, out into the court, and lay it on the grass beyond the moat, and it steams in the sun like something killed. You learn your own body as a tool, your wrists which thicken, your shoulders which round, your hands, which by the second year are Mistress Joan's hands in miniature, cracked at every joint, shiny with old burns, the nails gone soft and ridged from the lye, and the pads of the fingers so hardened that you can pick a coal out of the fire and hold it for a count of 3. You learn that the cracks open on lye day and close by Thursday, and open again on Monday, and that if you grease them at night with tallow they close faster, and that if you do not they bleed onto the linen, which is the one thing you must never do. So you grease them every night, sitting on the pallet in the dark with the tallow pot between your knees, working it in with your thumb while Hal complains about the smell. You learn the linen of the family, not as cloth, as people. Sir Thomas's shirts are fine Holland always, with a narrow black work at the neck that he had done in Flanders, and that you must wash by hand in a bowl, and never let near the copper. They come back from court with ink on the right cuff, everyone, because he writes standing up. They are never torn. They are never stained with anything but ink and sweat. Sir Thomas does not spill. Lady Elizabeth's linen you almost never see, because she has her own woman who does it in a bowl in her chamber, and what does come down is so clean it might have been washed already. George's shirts come down in a heap once a month, stiff with everything a young man at court gets on a shirt, and Mistress Joan holds them at arm's length and says, "That boy," and puts them through the lie twice. Mistress Mary's linen in these years tells you the whole story of her marriage and her other thing, fortnight by fortnight, in stains and smells and the particular way a shift is creased when it has been taken off in a hurry. In the summer of 1524, when you are 17, her shifts come down to the wash-house cut wider at the waist, and the girdle cloth stop, and in the autumn there is a birth, in the west wing, a girl, Catherine, and for a week the wash-house does nothing but the bloody linen of childbed, sheet after sheet. And Mistress Joan says nothing, and you say nothing, and Master Carey walks about the court with his cap in his hands, looking at the baby, as though it were a letter in a language he half knew. You count the months back. Everybody counts the months back. Nobody says the sum. And Anne's linen is a different thing again. It is cleaner than anyone's. That is what you notice first. She does not sweat much, or she does not sweat the way other people sweat, sour and heavy. Her shifts come down smelling of something dry and sharp, like the inside of a cedar chest, and her cuffs are worn at the edges from being pulled down constantly over her hands. You learn later why. She has a nail on one hand, a little extra piece, a rudiment, and she keeps it covered. Her sleeves are always long. Her cuffs are always frayed. Her linen is very clean and very worn. That is Anne. Everything about her is polished, and everything about her is under strain. In the spring, after she comes home, in the year 23, something happens at court that comes down to Hever in fragments. In the way things do, through the grooms and the carriers and the chaplain's clerk who has a cousin in the cardinal's household. There was a young man, the Earl of Northumberland's heir Percy, a boy in the cardinal's service. He and the Lady Anne had come to an understanding. The cardinal had put a stop to it in front of the whole household, and called her a foolish girl, and sent the boy north to marry someone else, and sent her home, and so she is home. Sulking, the grooms say. Sulking is not the word you would use. You wash her linen that spring, and it comes down as clean as ever, and the cuffs are frayed to threads, and once, only once, there is a pillow slip from her chamber, with the salt crust of dried tears on one side, a faint white bloom on the linen, which you know because you have seen it on your own. You rinse it in the cold trough. You do not say a word. But you notice that the house is different when she is in it. She does not sit in a chair the way Mary sat in a chair. She walks. She goes out with the hawks with George when he is home, and comes back with mud to the knee and her sleeves wet, which is a great trial to you. She plays the lute in the long gallery with the doors open, so the sound comes down the stair and into the court and even into the wash-house, and it is not like any music you've heard, quick and strange and sad French. She talks to her father in French at supper, fast, and he answers her as he answers no one else, as though she were a man he was doing business with. She talks to her mother almost not at all. She talks to Mary sometimes on the leads, where the two of them walk in the evening with their heads close, and you cannot hear what they say, and nobody can, and it is the only time in all those years you see Mary look easy. And she looks at the servants. That is the thing. She looks at you, not kindly, not unkindly. She looks at you the way she looked at the house from the litter, to see what you were. She catches you on the stair with a basket once in the second year. and she stops, and she looks at your hands on the handles, at the cracks and the shine, and she says in English, "Does that hurt?" You're so shocked you almost drop the basket. "Mistress, your hands. Does it hurt?" "Yes, mistress." She looks at them a moment longer. Then she says, "Mine too," and pulls her cuffs down over her fingers and goes past you down the stair. You stand there a long time. Sir Thomas is made a viscount in the summer of 1525 in a great ceremony at Bridewell with a dozen other men, and comes home Lord Rochford, and the household lines up in the court again, and he rides in on a new horse with a new cloak, and his eyes going click, click, click over every one of you. And the grooms say, in the stable, that the king made him a lord because of Mary. And the grooms are wrong, or half wrong, because the king made him a lord because he is useful and clever, and has been useful and clever for 20 years. But the grooms are also not wrong, because Master Carey has a new manor that same month, and the manor is worth more than the title. Nobody says the sum. You count it anyway. The second child comes in the spring of 26, a boy this time, Henry. Mistress Mary is brought to bed in the west wing again, and the sheets come down to the wash-house again. And Master Carey walks about the court again, and the chaplain christens the child in the little church across the moat, and you stand at the back of it with your hands hidden, and you look at the baby's red, furious face in the chaplain's arms, and you think, nobody in this church will ever say whose you are, and you will never know for certain, and that is the price of the manor. And after the boy is born, something stops. You know it stopped because the linen tells you. The shifts that come down from court in Mistress Mary's panniers stop smelling of the musk. The guest chamber sheets in the west wing stop coming down at all, because nobody uses the guest chamber. Master Carey stops getting manners. Sir Thomas, Lord Rochford, comes home from court in the autumn of that year with a face you have not seen on him before. A closed, careful, calculating face. The face of a man who's been told that one account is closed and another is about to be opened, and he goes up to the long gallery and sends for Anne, and they're up there for 2 hours with the door shut, and the lute is silent for a week afterwards. Mistress Mary comes down to Hever that winter, with both children and a small household, and a face that has gone from tallow to something quieter, something you would almost call relief, if you were allowed to call things anything. She's set aside. That is the phrase the grooms used, the way you would say a cloth was set aside. And she seems, if you are honest, lighter for it. She walks in the garden with the little girl. She lets Bess go. She wears the tawny gown less. She has been used and paid and finished with, and she is 27, and her husband is a pleasant man, and she has 2 children who may or may not be the king's, and she can breathe. That could have been the story. 1 daughter, 1 arrangement, a father who looked the other way and was paid for looking. It happens in every county in England. There are 6 houses in Kent alone where the king has been a guest in that particular sense, and the families have their manors, and the girls have their husbands, and nobody says the sum. But the linen has already started to tell you the next part, because Anne's cuffs that winter are frayed worse than ever, and there is a new smell on her shifts, faint under the cedar, not musk, something like fear. And in the spring the letters start. You do not see the letters. You are a wash girl. But you see the man who brings them, a groom of the king's chamber in the king's livery, riding under the gatehouse on a lathered horse once a week and then twice a week, handing a packet to the porter, waiting in the court while the porter goes up, coming back down an hour later with a packet in reply, riding out. You see the whole household pretending not to see him. You see Sir Thomas in the court watching the man ride out, with his hands folded behind him and his eyes going click, click, click over the horse, the livery, the speed. And you see Anne at the window of the long gallery, not watching the man at all, watching her father watch him. You are 19. You've been at Hever 7 years. You have washed the king's mistress's shifts, and the king's bastard swaddling, and the king's treasurer's inky cuffs, and you have never once said one word, and you would have said, if anyone had asked, that there was nothing the house could do now that would surprise you. Then Mistress Joan comes into the wash-house one morning in the summer of 27, that first summer of the letters, and shuts the door, which she never does, and says, "Sit down, Nan," which is never said, and you sit on the edge of the coal trough with your wet hands in your lap. "His lordship's been to see me," she says. "About the linen," you wait. The Lady Anne's linen, her shifts, her small cloths, all of it. From now, it's not to go through here. It's to be done in a bowl in a chamber by her woman, and dried in her chamber, pressed in her chamber, and nothing of hers is to be seen by anyone in this house below her own door. You do not understand. Mistress, the copper, not the trough, not the hedge, not the grass. She looks at you with her small hard eyes. He said, and I'm telling you what he said, that there's to be no reason, none, for anybody, ever, to say they saw a mark on his daughter's shift. And you understand. You understand so completely that you feel it go down through you like cold water. You think of the shift on the slab 5 years ago with the brown mark on it. You think of Mary at the window watching you salt it. You think of how the whole house knew what Mary was, because the wash-house knew, because the linen knew, and you think, he has learned. He counted that. He counted what it cost him that the house knew about Mary, and he is not going to pay it twice. Whatever is happening with the letters, whatever the second daughter is being made into, there will be no shift on a slab this time, no stain, no cloud of pink in a cold trough, no laundress with her eyes on the wall pretending not to know. The evidence will be washed in a bowl behind a locked door by a woman who came from Norfolk and will go back there. This time the father is going to keep his daughter clean, in the one way that matters, on paper, in the linen, in the record. "Yes, mistress," you say. "Good," Mistress Joan says. And then, more quietly, looking at the copper and not at you, "He's a careful man, his lordship. Careful men build the biggest houses, and the biggest houses burn the longest." She opens the door. The light comes in. Hal is standing outside it with a bucket in each hand and his mouth open. "Shut that," she says, "and get the water in." And he does, and the day goes on, and you never wash a piece of Anne Boleyn's linen again. But you see her. That is the thing. You are barred from her linen and not from her, because nobody can bar a wash girl from a house. You're in every passage, every court, every stair, with a basket on your hip, and the family walks past you the way water walks past a stone. And so you see the summer of the letters, and the autumn and the winter from the underneath. You see her stop hawking. She goes out once with George in August and comes back within the hour white. And the grooms say afterwards that a man in the king's livery had ridden into the park to find her there, and she had turned her horse and come straight home. You see her stop playing the lute with the doors open. The doors are shut now. The music comes down muffled and stops in the middle and starts and stops. You see her at supper, from the screen's passage where you're waiting for the napkins, sitting on her father's right where George used to sit listening to him talk. her long hands flat on the cloth on either side of her plate. She does not eat. She's never eaten much, but now she cuts things and moves them, and her father talks, low, steady, in French, and every so often she says one word, and he stops and thinks and goes on. You do not know what they are saying. You do not need to. You have seen a horse dealer at Edenbridge Fair explain to his son how you get a buyer to pay for the animal before he has ridden it. You see the mother, Lady Elizabeth, in the long gallery in the evening, sitting with her sewing in the last of the light alone, when her daughter and her husband are at the far end with their heads together. She sews. She does not look up. Her needle goes in and out, and her face is the face of a Howard, which is a face that has already seen all this happen to somebody else, in another reign, and knows how it ends and is not going to say. And you see Mary at Hever with her children and her set-aside husband and her easy face, walking in the garden, and then, in the autumn of 27, Mary standing in the court one morning as the king's groom rides out, watching him go, with an expression that stops you in the wash-house door with the basket half lifted. It is not jealousy. You expected jealousy. It is not even pity. It is something much worse than either. It is the face of a woman watching someone walk into a room she has just come out of, and knowing exactly what is in there, and knowing that nobody is going to let her say so. She turns and sees you looking. You drop your eyes, but not fast enough. "Nan," she says, quite quietly, across the court. You look up. You have to. She has said your name. "It was you salted my shift," she says. "That spring, 5 years ago, I watched you from the window." There is nobody else in the court. Hal is at the well. Mistress Joan is inside. The swans are on the moat. The sun is on the west wing. "Yes, mistress," you say. She nods slowly, as though you had told her something she wanted confirmed. Then she looks up at the west wing, at the middle window, which is her sister's now. "They'll not let you salt hers," she says. "Will they?" "No, mistress. No." She's quiet a moment. "He learned that from me. He learns everything from something." And she goes in. You stand in the door with the basket on your hip and the weight of the wet linen dragging at your arm, and you think, she is the only person in this house who has ever said it out loud. And she said it to the wash girl, because there was no one else it was safe to say it to. That night on the pallet, greasing your hands in the dark, you find that they are shaking, and you cannot make them stop. The king comes to Hever in the spring of 28, which is the thing you have been dreading and could not have named. He does not come once. He comes several times that spring and summer, the way a man comes to look at a property he has already decided to buy. The first time is in the last week of Lent. The porter has 3 hours' warning from a rider, and in those 3 hours the house goes mad in the particular silent Hever way. Everybody running and nobody speaking, rushes changed, hangings shaken, the best plate up from the strong room, the west wing guest chamber that has stood empty for 2 years, suddenly stripped and aired and made up with sheets you and Mistress Joan pressed in half an hour, with a flat iron so hot they scorched the cloth, and then the horn from the gatehouse, and the drawbridge coming down with its groan, and the hooves. You're in the wash-house door because you cannot not be. Hal is beside you with his mouth open. Mistress Joan is behind you with her hand on your shoulder, gripping, which is how you know she is as frightened as you are. He rides in first, not behind his gentleman, first, on a bay horse that fills the gatehouse arch, in a coat of green and white velvet that would buy the wash-house and everything in it 20 times over, with a face that is the biggest, pinkest, most cheerful face you have ever seen, laughing at something a man behind him has said, laughing so loud it bounces off the walls of the court and comes back at you doubled. He is enormous. You had heard he was tall. Tall is not the word. He takes up the court. The horse under him looks small. The gentlemen who ride in after him, and there are a dozen in a dozen colours, look like children, and he is happy. That is what you cannot get past afterwards. You had built something in your head from 7 years of stains, a thing made of Mary's white knuckles and Anne's frayed cuffs, and you had thought whatever rode in under that arch would look like what it had done. It looks like a man on a spring morning who has come to see a girl. Sir Thomas comes down the steps and kneels in the mud. Lady Elizabeth kneels. George kneels. The king swings down from the bay, and it is like watching a building step off a plinth, and he raises Sir Thomas with both hands and claps him on the shoulder and says something that makes the whole court laugh, gentlemen and grooms alike, and then he looks up, at the west wing, at the middle window. "And where's my Lady Anne?" he says. The voice is high for the size of him, light, carrying. It goes into every corner of the court and into the wash-house and into you. "She'll not come down?" Cheerful. "Then I'll go up." And he does. He walks across the court with his gentlemen streaming after him, past the kitchen door, past the wash-house door where you're standing with Mistress Joan's fingers digging into your shoulder, and as he passes he glances sideways, once, at the three of you in the doorway, the fat old woman and the big-handed girl and the gaping boy, and he grins at you, a quick, bright, open grin like a boy stealing apples. And then he has passed and up the stair and gone. You stand there. "Well," Mistress Joan says after a long moment, and lets go of your shoulder, and you feel the marks of her fingers there for an hour. You look across the court, up at the west wing where the windows are. Mistress Mary is at the far one, the end one, the one nobody has used since Bess left. She's standing very still with her hand flat on the glass, and she's looking down at the court, at the place where the king walked past, and her face, at that distance through the greenish panes, is a face you have seen once before. On a shift, in the salt, fading. Then she takes her hand from the glass and the window is empty. He stays 2 nights. He hunts in the park with Sir Thomas and George and comes back with the deer slung across the pack horses and blood on his boots, which come down to the wash-house that evening for the mud, and which you and Hal clean with a knife and a brush and a bucket of water that goes the colour of the moat, and you hold one of the boots in your lap while you work and you think, "This boot is worth my mother's cottage." It is soft Spanish leather lined with wool, and the sole is stitched so fine you cannot see the thread, and there is a smudge of deer's blood on the instep that has dried into the grain and will not shift, and you scrub at it with the brush until your wrist aches, and it does not shift, and Mistress Joan takes the boot out of your hands and looks at it and says, "Leave it. He'll not look. Kings don't look at their feet," and puts it by the fire to dry. He sups in the hall with the family, and the whole household serves, even you, standing along the wall in your one clean apron, with a napkin over your arm in case a napkin is called for, which it is not, because there are gentlemen for that. You stand there for 3 hours, with your feet aching and your hands folded, and you watch. He sits in Sir Thomas's chair at the head of the board. Sir Thomas sits on his right, and Lady Elizabeth on his left, and George beyond her, and Anne beyond Sir Thomas, so that she is at the king's right hand once removed, close enough to talk, far enough that he must lean. He leans the whole meal. He has a great plate of venison in front of him, and a great cup of Sir Thomas's best wine, and he barely touches either. He talks. To Sir Thomas in English, to Anne in French, which you cannot follow except for the way it is said, which is the way a man talks who is not used to trying and is trying. He laughs hugely, often at things she says, and his gentlemen laugh a half-second after him like an echo. And she does not laugh. She smiles, sometimes quick with her wide mouth. She answers him, quick and low, and he leans closer to catch it, and she does not lean to meet him. Her hands are flat on the cloth, her cuffs are pulled down to her knuckles, and once, when he reaches across the corner of the table, laughing, and puts his huge pink hand over hers on the cloth, she does not pull away, and she does not turn her hand up to his. She simply leaves it there under his, flat still, like something set down on a counter, and looks at him with those black eyes, until he takes his hand back, still laughing, and drinks. You are 21. You've been in this house since you were 12, and you've never seen anything like it. A woman doing that to a man. Any man, let alone that one. And her father beside them, watching, with his beautiful clean hands folded on the cloth and his face doing nothing at all. You understand something then, along the wall, with your feet burning. It is not what you thought. You had thought she was Mary again. The second coin, the same trade done over. And she is not. She is something the father has never had to sell before. She is a thing that is refusing to be sold, and that is what he is selling. He must see it too. He must have counted it. The refusal is the price. Mistress Mary does not come down to supper. She is not well, the household is told, and keeps her chamber, and Master Carey is at court and not here, and nobody at the high table mentions her. And the king, who once gave her husband 6 shillings and 8 pence at a wedding in his own chapel, does not ask. He leaves on the 3rd morning. The whole court kneels in the mud again. He kisses Lady Elizabeth's hand and claps George on the back and says something to Sir Thomas that makes Sir Thomas bow very low, and then he turns to Anne, who has come down at last in a gown of black damask with the French hood, and her hands folded at her waist, and he takes her hand and bows over it, low, the King of England bowing to a Kentish knight's daughter in a wet court, and kisses it. And then he mounts and rides out under the arch with his gentlemen streaming after him, and the drawbridge groans up, and the swans, which had scattered, come back. Sir Thomas stands in the court a long moment after the sound of hoofs has gone. Then he turns to his daughter and says something in French, one short sentence, and she answers with one shorter, and they go in. Mistress Joan puts her hand on your shoulder again and turns you back into the wash-house. Sheets, she says. Guest chamber, strip them and boil them. He'll be back. He is back. In May and in June. He comes to hawk and to hunt and to walk with Anne in the garden while her mother sits under the pear tree with her sewing and does not look up. The letters come between visits, now 3 a week. The groom's horse so regularly under the gatehouse that Hal starts to greet him by name. The guest chamber sheets come down and go up and come down. You could set the season by them, and the house changes under you. Not the family, the house. It fills with men, not the king's gentlemen. They come and go with him. Sir Thomas's men, lawyers riding down from London with satchels, clerks, a man from the cardinal's household twice, in a face like a shut door. Men who go up to the long gallery and stay for hours and come down and ride away without eating. Sir Thomas has always had a steward and a secretary and a man of business. Now he has a dozen, and they all look when they pass you on the stair, as though they were carrying something heavy that could not be set down. The grooms say the king is going to put away the queen, that the cardinal has been sent to the pope, that there is a court to be held and lawyers to be paid, and that Sir Thomas's men are the men who are paying them. And you think of the shift on the slab, the first one, the brown mark. You think of how easy it was that time. A stain, a trough, a hedge, some salt, and the king's mistress was clean again by Thursday. This time, they are not washing a shift. They are washing a queen out of a marriage, and it is taking a whole army of men in black with ink on their cuffs, and it has been going on for a year, and it has not come out. And you are standing at a copper in a washhouse in Kent with your hands in the boiling water, and the whole of that, all of it, the Pope and the Cardinal and the lawyers and the King's huge laughing face, comes down to you as a change in the weight of the linen you carry up the stair, heavier every month. More sheets, more napkins, more shirts, more men. Then the sweat comes. It comes to Hever in the last week of June, in the year 1528, on a hot still morning with no wind, and it comes the way it always comes, which is from nowhere, out of a clear sky, like a hand. You have heard of it all your life. Your mother's sister died of it before you were born. In the summer she was married, dead by nightfall on the day she woke well. It comes every few years, in the hot months, and it takes the young and the strong before the old and the weak, which nobody understands, and it takes the rich before the poor, which nobody understands either. And it is the only sickness in England for which there is a saying that everybody knows and nobody says lightly. Merry at dinner, dead at supper. The first you know is Hal. He comes in from the well with the 2 buckets at 5:30 in the morning, and he sets them down on the wash-house floor, and he does not go back for more. He stands there. He is 13 now, and taller than you, and thin as a rake. And he stands with his hands hanging, and he says in a strange small voice, "I'm cold." It is the hottest week of the year. The copper is not even lit yet, and the wash-house is already warm as a bread oven. You look at him. His face is grey, not pale. Grey, like the ash in the firebox. And there is sweat standing on his forehead in beads the size of peas, and his shirt is stuck to his chest, wet through, and he is shivering so hard his teeth click. You know. You have never seen it, and you know. Everybody in England knows. "Mistress," you say, not loud. You cannot make it loud. "Mistress Joan." She's at the door. She sees him. Her face does something you have never seen it do. A kind of flinch. All over, like a horse's skin when a fly lands. And then it sets. "Nan, get him up to the loft. Blankets, every blanket. Fire in the loft brazier, hot as it'll go, and shut the shutters. Don't let him lie down flat, prop him. And don't let him sleep. You hear me? Whatever he says, whatever he begs, he's not to sleep. If he sleeps, he'll not wake. Mistress, go. You take him up the ladder. He can barely climb. You go behind him with your hand flat on his back, and his back is soaked and burning and cold at once. Hot skin and cold sweat, and he is shaking so hard the ladder shakes. You get him onto your pallet, not his, because yours is nearer the brazier, and you pile every blanket in the loft on him, and yours, and Mistress Joan's, and you drag the brazier close and go down for coals with your apron for a carrier, and burn your hands through the cloth and do not feel it, and come up and light it, and shut the shutters so the loft goes dark and the air goes thick, and then you sit by him and you keep him awake. That is the cure. That is the only cure anybody knows. You sweat it out and you do not sleep, and if you live through the first day and the first night you live, The physicians say it. The old women say it. Mistress Joan says it, and she has buried a husband and 2 sisters with it. So you sit on the boards with your back against the loft wall in the roasting dark, and you keep a 13-year-old boy from sleeping, he begs. Within the hour he is begging. Nan, let me. Just a minute. Nan, please. His eyes roll up and his head goes back, and you take him by the shoulders and shake him, hard, and slap his face. And he comes back cursing and crying, and you do it again in 5 minutes. You talk to him. You tell him every story you know, your mother's stories, Edenbridge stories, the story of the miller's dog and the story of the priest who fell in the river, and he does not hear a word, but the sound keeps him surfaced. You pinch the soft skin inside his arm until he yelps. You put your wet thumb on his eyelids and hold them open. You hate yourself. You do it again. The sweat pours off him. It has a smell. That is the thing nobody tells you. It is not like the sweat of work or the sweat of a fever or the sweat of fear. You know all 3. You have washed all 3. This is sweet. Sickly, clinging, sweet, like rotting apples, and it soaks through the blankets and through your palate and into the boards, and the loft fills with it until you are breathing it, until you can taste it at the back of your throat. At noon, Mistress Joan's head comes up the ladder. She does not come all the way. She looks at Hal and at you. Still with us? Yes, mistress. Good. You drink anything? No. Drink. There's a jug by the ladder, warm ale. Him too, if he'll take it. Small sips. She pauses. Nan. It's in the house. You look at her. The Lady Anne's woman came down an hour ago. She's took to her bed, and his lordship. And Master Carey rode in from court last night, and he's abed with it too, in the west wing, and they've sent to London for the king's own physician. Her face is grey as Hal's. Half the family in one morning. The king? You do not know why you ask it. Was he? The king's gone. Rode out of Waltham the moment he heard there was a case in the town. He's gone to some house in the country with his own doctors and a locked gate. She says it flatly. No judgment. It is what kings do. Keep that boy awake. Her head goes down the ladder. You sit in the dark with the brazier ticking and Hal moaning and the sweet rot in your mouth, and you think, half the family, the father, the daughter, the son-in-law, and the king, who was here a fortnight ago, walking in the garden with his hand on her arm, has run, and you think very clearly a thought you're not allowed to have. If she dies today, the whole of it is over. The lawyers, the cardinal, the pope, the men in black on the stairs. A year of the house being built on her, brick by brick, letter by letter. And if she stops breathing before dark, it all comes down, and there will be nothing to show for it. Nothing, except a set-aside sister and a boy, with the king's name in a cradle, and a father who was made a lord. And the same thought, from underneath. If she dies today, she will never have to be what they are making her. You do not know which of those is a prayer. You keep Hal awake. At some point in the afternoon, the light through the shutter cracks goes from white to gold, and you know it is evening, and you have not moved in 12 hours, and your legs have gone from aching to numb to something beyond numb, a kind of wooden absence, and your bladder is a stone, and you have drunk the whole jug of warm ale, and Hal has taken perhaps 6 sips of it, and has vomited twice and is still, somehow, alive. His shaking has changed, slower, deeper. His eyes, when you hold them open, have started to look at you instead of through you. Nan, he says, almost his own voice. I'm here. Am I dead? You're too ugly to be dead. Something that might be a laugh. Then his eyes go and you shake him, and he comes back and you go on. Mistress Joan comes up at dark with a candle and another jug and a bowl of something, and looks at him, and puts the back of her ruined hand against his forehead, and holds it there, and you watch her face. "Turned," she says. "Mistress. It's turned. The sweat's cooling. Feel." She takes your hand and puts it where hers was, and Hal's forehead is wet, but the wet is not burning any more. It is only wet, ordinary wet, like a child come in from rain. He'll do. Keep him warm. Let him sleep now, he's past it. Sleep's the cure now, same as it was the death this morning. You take your hand away. It is shaking. Mistress. The house. She sits down on the end of Hal's empty pallet heavily, and puts the candle on the boards, and for a moment she looks every year of what she is. "Master Carey's dead," she says. You do not say anything. "About 4 o'clock. The king's physician got here at 3. Buts! He went to his lordship first, then to the Lady Anne, then to Master Carey, and Master Carey was all ready." She makes a small movement with her hand. 12 hours. He rode in last night whistling. Mistress Mary's with him. She's not took it, nor the children. And his lordship's bad, very bad. Butts is with him. The Lady Anne. She stops. Butts says she'll live. He said it in the passage, I heard him. He said, "This one will live. She's too angry to die." And then he went back in. She picks up the candle. "There's a letter come for her," she says, "from him, from the king." The groom rode it down through a village with the sweat in every second house, and he was so frightened he wouldn't get off his horse in the court. He threw it to the porter. In the middle of all this, a letter. She goes to the ladder. "Mistress, you don't know why you say it. Did he write to Master Carey?" She looks at you over the candle for a long moment, and her face is the face of a woman who has been not saying things for 40 years and has almost run out. "Sleep, Nan," she says. "You've done a day's work," and goes down. You do not sleep. You cannot. Hal sleeps at last, deep and still and breathing, and you sit against the wall with your knees drawn up and your hands hanging between them, and the brazier dies to red, and the loft cools, and the sweet rot fades until it is only the ordinary smell of the loft, tallow and straw and 2 people, and you sit in the dark and you think about William Carey. You washed his shirts for 8 years. He was not a good man or a bad man. He liked hawking. He called you Nan. He stood in the court holding his cap and looked at a baby that might not be his as though it were a gift he did not know how to thank anyone for. And he took the manors, and he took the park, and he took the wife back when the king was finished, and he never that you saw in 8 years raised his voice or his hand. And he rode in whistling last night, and he is lying now in the west wing under a sheet you will have to wash, and his wife is sitting by him, the set-aside daughter, the one who was paid off in manors, and the manors were in his name, all of them, everyone. And that is the thing you know that she may not have thought of yet. The manors were his, not hers, and he has no heir but a boy of 2. You sit in the dark and you count. Click, click, click. You go down at first light, because the copper does not care who is dead. The wash-house is as you left it, 2 buckets on the floor, the fire unlit, the day's linen in a heap. Mistress Joan is not there. You light the fire on your knees, and your hands will not hold the flint. They are shaking so, and it takes you a quarter of an hour, and when the flame catches, you kneel there in front of it with your palms out to the heat, and your face wet, and you do not know when you started crying. Then you get up and start the water. By full morning the sheets have begun to come down. Master Carey's first, brought by a groom, who holds them in a bundle at arm's length and drops them on the flags and backs away as though they might bite. And you look at the bundle, and you know Mistress Joan would tell you not to touch them, to burn them, and you cannot burn them, because nobody has told you to, and because they are good linen, and because a laundress does not burn things. So you put them through the copper twice, boiling, with the lye so strong it strips the skin from your forearms, and you hang them on the far hedge when nobody goes, and you say nothing. Then Sir Thomas's. He is alive. Butts has been with him all night. The sheets that come down are soaked through, sweet stinking, heavy as a drowned man, and there are 3 sets of them, and they tell you that he sweated it out and lived, and that it took everything Butts had. And then, at noon, a small bundle from the west wing. Not from the chamber where Master Carey's lying, from the middle window. A shift, a pillow slip, a small cloth, brought down by the Norfolk woman herself, who has not left that chamber since the family came home in 22, and who stands now in the wash-house door with the bundle held against her chest and her face like paper. His lordship's orders, she says, everything of hers to be boiled. Now, he said, she swallows. He said it doesn't matter now who sees it. He said get it clean, she holds it out. You take it. It is very light. It smells of the sweet rot, and under that cedar. The cuffs of the shift are frayed to threads. You put it in the copper with everything else. You boil it, William Carey's sheets and Sir Thomas's sheets and the kitchen aprons and Hal's stinking blankets. All of it together in the 60 gallons. All of it going round in the same grey water. The dead man's linen and the living man's and the girls the king ran away from. And you stir it with the great wooden paddle, leaning your whole weight on it, and the steam comes up into your face, and you watch it go round. Nobody comes to stop you. Nobody comes to watch. For one day, in the summer of 1528, in the middle of the sweating sickness, the wash-house at Hever is the one place in the house where nothing is hidden. It all goes in the same pot, and it all comes out the same colour. By evening it is dry. You fold it, you put it in the press. You never look at it again. William Carey is buried in the little church across the moat in the first week of July, in the heat, quickly, with the chaplain gabbling and a dozen mourners standing well apart from one another, in the way people stand that summer, as though grief were catching. Sir Thomas is not there. He is still abed. Anne is not there. She's in her chamber with the shutters closed and the king's physician's man at the door. Lady Elizabeth stands at the graveside with her Howard face. George holds his sister Mary's arm. Mary does not weep. She stands with her hand on the little girl's head and the boy on a nurse's hip beside her, and she looks at the hole in the ground, and you watch her from the back of the churchyard with your hands under your apron, and you think, she is counting. She has learned it too. She's standing over her husband's grave, and she's doing the sum, and the sum is what you did in the loft in the dark, and it comes out the same. 2 children, no husband, no manners, a father in a bed with his eyes going click, 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 even through the fever, and a sister at the window. You are right. You find out how right within the month. It comes down to the wash-house the way everything does, in pieces sideways. The grooms have it from the porter, and the porter has it from the steward's boy, and the steward's boy stood outside the long gallery door. Mistress Mary went up to her father when he could sit in a chair again, in the 2nd week of July, with her children, and she asked him for her keep, the keep of a widowed daughter. Her jointure was nothing. Carey had nothing of his own. The king's manors had been Carey's and gone to the crown, to be regranted, and the crown had not yet said to whom. She had, said the steward's boy, £200 of debt in her husband's name, and a nurse to pay, and nothing in her purse but what was in it. And her father in his chair with a blanket over his knees and his beautiful hands folded on it said no, not cruelly. The steward's boy was clear on that. He said it in the voice he used for accounts. Mary had made her choices. Mary's husband had made his. The manors had been given to him and not to Mary, and not to Hever, and Sir Thomas had not seen a penny of them, and would not now be expected to make good on the king's gifts to another man. She could stay at Hever, she could have a room. But the debts were her husband's, and the children were her husband's, and he was not going to be seen to pay for either, because to pay for them was to say whose they were. Whose they were, Mistress Joan repeats, when you tell her, on the pallet that night, because you have to tell someone and there is no one else. Christ! He'll not pay for the boy, because paying for the boy says the boy's the king's, and it's the king's boy that's the reason he's a lord. Yes, mistress. And the other one? Upstairs. Does she know? I don't know, mistress, but she does. You find out that too, because in August the letter comes, not to Anne, to her father. The king's own hand, the porter says, who has carried enough of the king's letters by now to know the seal from across a room, and this one goes not to the middle window but to the long gallery, and Sir Thomas reads it sitting in his chair with the blanket over his knees, and the steward's boy outside the door hears him say one word in French that he will not repeat, and then nothing for a long time. The king, it turns out, had written to Anne first, and Anne had written back, and whatever she wrote had made the king take up his pen and write to her father in his own hand, and tell him that it was a strange thing that a man would not keep his own daughter, and that he would be obliged if Lord Rochford would see to it that Mistress Carey wanted for nothing. You piece this together over weeks. The grooms have half. The chaplain's clerk has another half, and the last piece comes from Mary herself, because in September you're on the stair with a basket and she's coming down it, in black, thinner, with the little girl's hand in hers, and she stops. Nan, she says. Mistress. My sister has got me £100 a year, she says, from the king, for life. Did you know? No, mistress. No, nobody does yet. My father does. She looks down at the child who is looking at your hands. She wrote to him, and told him what my father had said, and the king wrote to my father, and now I'm to have 100 a year, and my son's to go to her, to be brought up in her household when she has one, as her ward. My sister's ward. Her mouth moves. The king's son, brought up by the king's. She stops. She looks at you. What are they calling her? In the yard? What do the grooms call her? You do not answer. The king's whore, Mary says, quite steadily. That's what they called me. I heard it. Every day at court for 2 years I heard it in the passages, and nobody ever said it to my face, and everybody said it to my back. And now they'll call her it. And it's not true. That's the thing, Nan. It was true of me. It's not true of her. She hasn't. She won't. That's the whole... She stops again. That's the whole trade. Do you see? He learned from me that a bought thing gets thrown away, so he's selling something that can't be bought, and the king's paying more for it every month, and he'll go on paying, and my father will go on collecting until one of them... She does not finish. The child tugs her hand. She looks down. You wash my shift, she says to you, or to the child, or to nobody. I always think of that. I don't know why. Of all of it. A girl in the yard with salt. And she goes down the stair with the child, and you go up with a basket, and your arms are shaking again, and it is not the weight. That autumn you go up onto the gatehouse you have never been. Washgirls do not go up on the leads, but Mistress Jones sends you with a bundle of new pressed linen for the porter's lodge, and the porter is out, and the door to the tower stair is open, and you are 21, and you have spent 9 years looking at the underneath of things, and you go up. The stair is dark and narrow and turns on itself so many times you lose count, and your calves burn by the top, and then there is a low door and you push it and the wind takes it out of your hand, and you are on the roof of the gatehouse, with the whole of Kent laid out under you like a cloth on a hedge. You stand there with the bundle of linen forgotten in your arms. Hever is small. That is the first thing. From the court, from the washhouse door, it has been your whole world for 9 years, and from up here it is a square of grey stone with a moat round it, the size of a good farm, sitting in a valley so green it hurts. The Eden winds past it, brown and slow. Beyond the moat, the park, the deer, the oaks. Beyond the park, the fields, the hop gardens, the hedges, all going up in folds to the ridge where the road runs to London. To the south, the Weald, blue and endless, the forest that goes on to the sea. Smoke from Edenbridge. 2 miles down, where your mother is, where you've not been in a year. The swans are on the moat. From here they are white specks. The court is a wet square. The west wing windows catch the sun, and the middle one is open, and there is a shape at it, sitting, that from up here is just a dark mark against the glass. You look down at the house. Everything that has happened in it, everything you have washed out of it, fits inside a square of stone you could walk round in 5 minutes. Mary's shift, Hal's sweat, William Carey's sheets, the king's boots, the letters, the men in black, the father in his chair saying no in the voice for accounts, all of it in that box, in that valley, in a county so quiet you can hear a dog bark in the next parish, and from the Ridge Road, the London Road, at this moment a rider coming, small as a beetle, in a livery you can tell from here is the king's. You stand and watch him come down through the folds of the fields. He takes a quarter of an hour. You watch every yard of it. Something in you wants to shout, to warn the house, and you do not know what the warning would be, except that it is coming. Whatever it is, it has been coming for 6 years, and the house has been made ready for it the way you make ready a guest chamber, aired and stripped and pressed, and there is nothing left to do but let it in. The horn goes from the lodge under your feet. The drawbridge groans. The beetle rides in under the arch and is gone from your sight, and the court fills with tiny running people, and the shape at the middle window rises and moves away. And you turn round on the roof with the wind pulling at your cap, and you look the other way, south, at the Weald, at the forest going away blue to the edge of the world where no one is counting anything. Then you go down the stair with the linen because the porter will be back and you are a wash girl and the leads are not for you. The cardinal falls the next year. You've never seen him, only his men, the shut-faced ones on the stair. But you know the shape of the thing by then. You know a set-aside when you see one. And in the autumn of 29, when the news comes that Wolsey's has been stripped of his seal and sent from court, you think, so the father has learned another thing, that the king throws away not only women. Sir Thomas is made Earl of Wiltshire that December. 2 earldoms, Wiltshire and Ormond, both at once, in a ceremony that Anne watches from a place above the ambassadors' wives, and the whole county says the word Earl, the way it once said whore, in the passages to the back. Lady Elizabeth is a countess. George is Viscount Rochford now, his father's old title passed down to him like a coat. and Anne is the Lady Anne Rochford, and has her own household at Greenwich, and her own rooms above the king's, and her own linen washed by her own women, in her own bowls, and none of it comes to Hever any more. They're all at court, the house empties. Mary is at court too, in her sister's household, on her 100 a year, in black, watched. The boy Henry Carey is in a nursery somewhere with tutors. The little girl is at Hever still, with a nurse, running in the court in the mornings while you carry the linen past. A solemn, dark-haired child who looks, everybody says without saying, like nobody in particular, and the wash-house goes quiet. That is the strange part. The linen halves. The copper is lit 3 days and 5. You have time, for the first time in 9 years, to sit in the door in the evening with the tallow pot and grease your hands slowly, working it into every crack, and watch the swans, and think. Mistress Joan is not well that winter. She does not say so, but her hands, which have not straightened in 20 years, will not close either now, and she holds the linen between her wrists and her chest to carry it, and she sits down more, and she coughs. In the spring she sends you to do the wringing alone with Hal on the other end of the sheet, and stands and watches, and does not correct you, which she has never in 9 years failed to do. "You'll have this," she says one evening, not looking at you, looking at the moat, the wash-house, when I'm done. "His lordship's steward has it written down," I asked. "Mistress, don't, I'm not dying, I'm old. It's different, it just takes longer." She turns her ruined hands over in her lap and looks at them as though they belong to somebody else. 41 years I've had my hands in this house's dirt. Old Sir William that built the gatehouse. I did his shrouds. I did the Lady Elizabeth's wedding sheets. I did every one of those children's swaddling, George and Mary and Anne and the ones that died. I've seen it all go in the copper, and I never said a word. She's quiet a moment. "I want you to know I'm not sorry. You'll think about that later when it's you. Whether it's a thing to be sorry for, keeping your mouth shut, letting it go round in the pot. Is it, mistress?" She thinks about it, really thinks. The swans turn on the water. "It's the trade," she says at last. "You see the underneath and you don't say. That's what they pay you for. And it's not nothing, Nan. It's not nothing that there's one place in every great house where everything's known and nothing's said. It's like she searches, like the moat. Everything goes in it, the privies and the swans, and it just sits there still, and the house stands up out of it. Somebody's got to be the moat. You do not know what to say to that. You will think about it for 30 years. But I'll tell you what I am sorry for," she says. "I'm sorry I never once put my hand on that girl's arm, Mary, when she came back from court with her face like that in 22, when you salted her shift. I could have gone up. I could have said, 'I've seen it, child, and it's washed and it's gone, and nobody in this house will ever say,' and I didn't, because that's not the trade either." She closes her eyes. "That's the thing about the moat. It doesn't say the good things either." She goes in. "You sit in the door a long time with the tallow going soft in your hand. That summer the boy Hal is sent for by the steward, and told that the wash-house does not need a water boy who is 16 and built like a plough-horse, and that there is a place for him with the grooms, and he goes and comes back to the wash-house door every evening for a month with a face like a lost dog, until Mistress Joan throws a wet cloth at him and tells him to get on with his life. He is your brother near enough. You kept him alive for a day and a night in the dark, and you have never spoken of it, either of you, and you never will. But on the day he goes to the stables, he stops in the door and says, 'Nan,' and you say, 'What?' And he says, 'Nothing,' and goes. and you get a new girl from Edenbridge, a cousin of yours, Tibby, 12, with strong wrists and no opinions, who cries herself to sleep 3 nights running because the loft is cold and the wash-house frightens her. On the 3rd night you sit down on the end of her pallet in the dark. You'll see things, you say. In the spring of 1533, the Earl of Wiltshire sends down to Hever for 6 of the household to come up to London for the 1st of June, and be found lodging, and be given a place to stand. And the 6 are the steward and his wife and the chaplain and 2 of the grooms. And you. You do not know why you. Mistress Joan says, because you've been here longest of any that's not gentry, and he counts things like that. And it is the first time you've ever heard her say his name and counts in the same breath, and she says it flat looking at the moat, because it is a coronation. The king has married her, in January secretly, in a room at Whitehall with almost nobody there, and by May the Archbishop, the new one, Cranmer, has sat in a court at Dunstable and said in a loud voice that the old marriage never was won, and she is queen, and she is 5 months gone with child, which the whole of England has counted on its fingers and not said, and on Whitsun she is to be crowned at Westminster, with a procession through the city the day before, and her father's household is to stand in the street and see it. You have never been to London. You have never been past Tunbridge. You ride in a cart with the steward's wife and the linen, because of course there is linen. 3 days of it, the Earl's shirts and the Countess's smocks and the Queen's own. For the Queen has sent to Hever for the shift she wore as a girl, the old fine ones with the black work, because, says the steward's wife, she wants something of the house next to her skin on the day, and you have washed them in a bowl by hand at Hever, alone in the wash-house at night with a candle, the first of her linen you have touched in 6 years, and they smelled of cedar and nothing else, and the cuffs were frayed, and you did not mend them because nobody told you to. London is a smell first. You smell it from Suffolk, from the far side of the river, a great thick stew of smoke and fish and dung and people that comes across the water and gets into the cart and into your clothes and stays. Then it is a noise, a roar that never stops, that you think at first is the river, and then no is not. Then it is the bridge, which is a street with houses on it, which you cannot make sense of, which the cart crawls across for half an hour with the water going under in a rush. You can feel through the boards. And then it is the city, and you stop trying to make sense of anything. The steward's wife finds you a place in Cheapside on the Saturday morning. Cheapside is a street so wide you could fit the whole court of Hever across it, and still have room for the swans, lined on both sides with houses 5 stories high, with every window full of faces, and the street itself has been gravelled fresh, and the gravel is already ground to dust under the feet of more people than you knew were alive. The houses are hung with cloth, not linen. Cloth of gold, crimson velvet, arras, tapestry, hung out of the windows on poles and down the fronts of the houses so that the whole street is a corridor of colour, and the sun hits it and it burns. You stand in it with your hands folded in front of your good apron and your back against a goldsmith's shutter, and the steward's wife holds your elbow so the crowd does not take you, and you wait. You wait 4 hours. Your feet die. The crowd presses. A man beside you is eating a pie and the grease is running down his wrist and he wipes it on his neighbour's sleeve without noticing, and the neighbour does not notice either. A woman behind you is telling anyone who will listen that she stood in this same street for Queen Catherine, God rest her. And there were more people then. and they cheered louder, and the cloth of gold was real. Nobody argues with her. Nobody agrees. Because that is the thing you feel, pressed against the goldsmith's shutter. It is a great crowd. It is not a cheering crowd. It talks. It looks. It waits. When the sheriff's men come through clearing the road with staves, it moves back, sullen, and moves forward again. Then the noise changes, far down the street toward the tower, and comes up toward you like weather. Trumpets first, then the French ambassador's men, in blue velvet with one sleeve yellow, 12 of them, on horses with blue trappings, and the crowd looks. Then the judges, then the knights of the Bath, in their new violet, who were made last night in the tower, 18 of them, and the steward's wife points and says a name and you do not hear it. Then abbots and bishops in copes so stiff with gold they sit on the horses like boxes. Then lords, then more lords, then the archbishop, the new one, thin, with a face like a man doing sums, then the mayor of London with his mace and his sour mouth, and then the litter. It is white, everything is white. The litter is cloth of white gold, and the 2 palfreys that carry it are in white damask to their hooves, and the canopy over it is cloth of gold on 4 gilt staves carried by 4 knights on foot, and inside it, sitting up very straight, in a kirtle of white cloth of tissue and a mantle of the same furred with ermine, with her black hair loose down her back to below the seat, with a circlet of gold and rubies on her head, and her hands folded in her lap with the cuffs pulled down, is the Lady Anne. She is very pale. She is very thin, except at the middle where the white tissue is cut loose over the child. Her mouth is set, and her eyes go over the crowd, left, right, left, click, 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 her father's eyes, counting the faces and finding what they are and knowing what that is worth. The crowd looks back. It does not roar. Here and there a man pulls off his cap. Here and there a woman cries out a blessing. But mostly it looks, the way it looked at everything else, and the litter goes by at a walk, and you hear a man behind you say quite clearly, "Ha ha," which is what people are saying up and down the route, because the king and the queen have had their initials painted on every arch, H and A, H and A, and if you say it aloud it is a laugh. And behind the litter, on a horse in crimson, with his beautiful clean hands on the reins, rides the Earl of Wiltshire. He does not look at the crowd. He looks straight ahead at the litter, and his face, as he passes you at a walk close enough to touch, is the face you saw in the court at Hever the first time the king rode in. The face of a man watching an account come to its total. You do not know you have moved until the steward's wife hauls on your elbow. You had stepped off the shutter toward the street. You do not know what you are going to do. "Nan," she hisses. You stand still. The litter goes by. The white goes by. The father goes by. And then it is lords again, and ladies in crimson on horses, and the chariots of the countesses, and the steward's wife is naming them, and you do not hear a single name until she says, "And that's the Lady Carey." And you look. She is on a horse, in crimson like the rest, in the second rank of ladies with the older ones. Her hair is dressed and her face is painted, and she sits her horse well, she always did, and she's looking straight ahead at the back of the white litter 20 yards in front of her, at her sister's black hair falling over the white gold, and her hands on the reins are gripping so hard that even from here, even across the gravel and the crowd, you can see they has gone white. Nobody cheers for her. Nobody knows who she is. She is one crimson lady among 40, the set-aside sister. The one the crowd would have known 10 years ago in the passages to her back. She rides past. She does not see you. She sees nothing but the litter. And then it is all past, the whole river of it, going up Cheapside towards St. Paul's, and the trumpets fade, and the crowd starts to break and grumble and look for its dinner, and the woman behind you says that for Queen Catherine they had roasted an ox in the street, and the steward's wife lets go of your elbow at last, and you find that your hands, folded in front of your apron, are wet through, and you do not know if it is sweat or the pieman's grease or something else. That night you sit up in the lodging in Fenchurch Street with the Queen's shifts in a bowl, because they will be sent for in the morning, and they have travelled and must be freshened, and you rinse them in water you have warmed over a brazier, and you press them with a small iron on a board on your knees, the cedar coming up off the cloth in the heat, and you think about the two faces on the horses, one counting the total, one counting the cost, and the one in the litter between them in white, counting the crowd. You never see the crowning. That is in the Abbey on the Sunday, and the household stands in the yard outside among 10,000 others, and hears the trumpets and the great shout when it is done, and sees nothing, and on the Monday the cart goes back to Kent. But on the Sunday night, late, there is a scratch on the lodging door, and it is one of the Queen's women, one you do not know, a Lincolnshire voice, with a packet. "For the wash girl from Hever," she says, "from the Queen's Grace. She says you're to have it." It is a shift, one of the old ones, the finest, the black work at the neck that was done in Flanders when she was a girl. It has been worn today, under the crimson and the ermine and the cloth of gold against her skin for the anointing. It smells of cedar and faintly of chrism oil, and of her. The cuffs are frayed. "She said," says the Lincolnshire woman, "that it's for the hands. She said you'd know. You stand in the doorway holding it. It weighs nothing. Does that hurt?" she asked you on the stair at Hever 10 years ago, and pulled her cuffs down. You do not sleep that night. You sit with the shift in your lap, on the pallet, in the London dark, with the London noise coming through the shutter, and you do not fold it, and you do not press it, and you do not put it in any basket, because there is no basket it belongs in now. In September the child is born at Greenwich, and it is a girl, and the bonfires that were laid ready in every parish are lit anyway, but smaller, and the king does not go to the christening, and the household at Hever hears all this from the grooms and says nothing, and the little girl, Catherine Carey, who is 9 now and solemn, asks you in the court whether the new baby is her cousin, and you say yes, and she says, "And is she the king's?" And you say, "She's the Queen's mistress," and she looks at you with her dark eyes for a long time and says, "That's not what I asked," and goes in. And in the spring of the year after, Mary is gone, not set aside, gone, banished. The story comes down to Hever in the summer of 34, the way all the stories have come, in pieces, and the pieces are these, that Mary had married again, secretly, a soldier from the Calais garrison named Stafford, a nobody, a younger son with no land and no money, that she had married him for love, and had not told her sister or her father, and had come to court in the autumn with her belly showing, and the Queen had seen it, and had asked, and Mary had told her. And the Queen had had her thrown out of the household the same day, and the Earl had cut off her 100 a year, and the King had said nothing, and she was living now, with her soldier and her belly, in the country somewhere on nothing. She wrote to Cromwell, the chaplain's clerk says, in the court to the grooms, and you are at the well with a bucket, and you stop. The King's secretary begging him to speak for her. My cousin saw the letter. It's a long letter. What does it say? The clerk thinks. He is a careful man. It says she'd rather beg her bread with him than be the greatest queen in Christendom. Nobody says anything. The swans turn. Then one of the grooms laughs, short, and says, "Well, that's one Boleyn out of it." And the clerk says, "Mind your tongue," and the court empties. You stand at the well with the bucket half up and the rope burning your palms, and you think of the shift on the slab, and the white knuckles at the window, and the horse in the crimson rank with the hands gripping, and you think, she got out. The first one. The bought one. The one who was thrown away. She married a nobody for love, and she was thrown out again, properly this time for good. And she wrote to the most dangerous man in England to say she would rather beg. And you think, she's the only one of them who will die in her bed. You do not know that yet. But you think it. And you are right. The Queen does not come to Hever again, nor the Earl much. The house is a shell that year and the next, kept up, aired, ready. The guest chamber pressed and never slept in. The swans fed. The linen halved and halved again. Mistress Joan takes to her pallet at Christmas, and does not leave it. And you do the wash-house alone with Tibby, and sit with the old woman in the evenings with the tallow pot, greasing her hands now instead of yours, working it into the cracks that will never close, while she tells you which stains came out of which sheets 40 years ago, as though it were the history of England. In the January of 36 the news comes that the old Queen, Catherine, is dead, in her cold house in the fens, and that the king wore yellow and danced. And 2 weeks after that, the news that the Queen, the new one, had miscarried of a boy. Mistress Joan hears it on the pallet with her eyes closed. "That's the account," she says. "That's the total. She's had her girl and she's lost her boy and she's 35 years old and there's no more manors to give." "Mistress, you think I don't know what a house sounds like when it's counting? I've lived under one for 43 years. She opens her eyes. "Go and look at the Earl's shirts when they come down at Easter. Look at the cuffs. You'll see." You do. They come down in April with the gentleman's servant who's ridden from Greenwich and who will not eat in the kitchen. And the cuffs are inked, as always. But the ink is smeared, not blotted. Smeared, all along the edge, as though a hand had been dragged across wet writing again and again. Sir Thomas does not spill. You put the shirts through the copper. You do not say a word. The news comes to Hever on the 4th of May, in the year 1536, and it does not come by a groom in livery. It comes by a carrier from Tunbridge who was not sent, who simply stops his cart at the drawbridge and shouts it up at the porter, as though it were their price of hops. The Queen is in the Tower. So is my Lord Rochford, her brother. So are 4 gentlemen of the King's Chamber, arrested at the May-Day joust and rowed down the river in the King's own barge. The charge, the carrier shouts, and here he looks up at the windows and drops his voice not at all, is adultery, with the 4, and with her brother. The porter does not answer. He stands in the lodge door. The carrier waits a moment for something and gets nothing and shrugs and drives on. You're in the court with a basket. You have heard every word. So has Tibby at the well, and so has Hal at the stable arch, and so has the little girl Catherine Carey, 12 now, who was crossing to the garden with her book, and has stopped in the middle of the wet flags as though she had walked into a wall. Nobody moves. The swans turn. Then the girl says in a clear high voice that goes into every corner of the court, "With her brother?" And the porter says, "Get inside, mistress," in a voice you've never heard him use to any one of the family, and she goes, running, and drops her book, and does not come back for it, and it lies on the flags in the wet until you pick it up an hour later, and dry the pages one by the copper fire, and put it on the chapel step because you do not know where else. That is the whole of it for Hever. That is how the house learns, not from the Earl, who is at court, in his rooms at Greenwich, and who does not write, not from the Countess, who is with him, and does not write either, from a hop carrier. You go up to the loft that night and tell Mistress Joan. She's very small on the palate now. She has not eaten in 3 days except broth you spoon into her, and her breath is slow and has a catch in it. But her eyes open when you say the words, and she looks at the roof for a long time. Her brother, she says. That's what the carrier said. I did that boy's swaddling. Her voice is a thread. I did his first shirts. He used to come to the wash-house door when he was 5 and put his hands in the cold trough because he liked the feel. She's quiet. They'll say it in every passage in England now, to her back, and she'll hear it. Same as Mary, only there's no manor at the end of it this time. Mistress, will they? Yes. You do not ask what. You know what? His lordship, you say. The Earl. Does he... Will he what? Speak? Something that in another year would have been a laugh. He's kept his mouth shut for 14 years while they took the one and paid for the other. You think he'll open it now, when opening it's death? He's a careful man. Careful men build the biggest houses. Her eyes close. He'll keep his offices. Watch. He'll keep everyone. The king doesn't throw away what's useful, only what's used. She's right. She's right about all of it, and she does not live to see any of it. She dies on the 9th of May in the loft in the early morning with your hand on her ruined one, and the tallow pot between your knees, and the last thing she says, so quiet you have to put your ear to her mouth, is, "Cold first. Always cold first." And you say, "Yes, mistress," and she is gone. You wash her yourself, in the wash-house, in the cold trough. Nobody tells you to, and nobody stops you. You wash 43 years of lie off a body that weighs no more than a wet sheet, and you dry it, and you wrap it in a good linen shroud that you press first, because she would have wanted the creases straight, and you and Hal carry her across the moat to the little church and put her in the ground beside William Carey, in the corner where the servants go, and the chaplain gabbles and Tibby cries, and you do not cry for a week. And then, on the 19th of May at about 9 in the morning, you're standing at the copper with the paddle in both hands stirring the Earl's sheets, and you find that you have stopped, and the paddle is still, and the steam is coming up into your face, and you do not know how long you have been standing there. You do not know it is the 19th. You do not know it is 9 in the morning. You find that out later, from the grooms, who have it from a man who has it from a man who was on the green inside the tower walls, and saw the Frenchman with the sword and the straw and the white cap and the whole thing, over in the time it takes to say a pater noster. You know nothing that morning. You stand at the copper with the sheets going still in the grey water and the steam in your face, and you think, for no reason you can name, she is very clean. Nothing of hers ever came down with a mark. He saw to that. Whatever they say now, in the passages to her back, there is not one shift in England with a stain on it that says it is true. That is what he bought her, with the bowl and the locked door. 14 years ago. That is all he bought her. You start stirring again. The day goes on. The Earl comes home to Hever in the 2nd week of June. He rides in under the arch alone, on an old horse with 2 servants behind, and he does not look at the west wing, and he does not look at the household, which has come out into the court because it does not know what else to do, and he does not look at the swans, He gets down, he goes in. The Countess does not come with him. She is at court still in her rooms, the grooms say, and does not go out and has not been seen. He has kept his offices, everyone. Mistress Jones said he would. He is still Lord Privy Seal for a month, until the King gives it to Cromwell, and after that he is still an Earl, still Wiltshire, still Ormond, still on the council, still received. He has lost a son and a daughter in 2 days, both by the axe, and the King has not taken one manor from him, because he is useful, because he did not speak. His shirts come down to the wash-house that first week. You take them from his man at the door. The cuffs are clean, no ink at all. He has not written a line. You put them through the copper and you hang them on the hedge, and the sun is on them by noon, and they're dry by 3, and you fold them and you carry them up, sideways, on the stair, the way you've gone up it for 16 years, and you scratch on the long gallery door, and there is no answer, and you scratch again, and there is no answer, and so you do what you have never done in that house. You open it. He is sitting in the chair, the one with the blanket from the summer of the sweat, though there is no blanket now. He is sitting with his beautiful clean hands on the arms of it, and he is looking at the long window at the end of the gallery, where the light comes in, and he does not turn his head. You stand in the door with the basket. You should back out. You do not. My lord, the linen. Nothing. Where would you have it, my lord? Nothing. And then, not turning, are you the wash girl? Yes, my lord. The one that's been here since the girls came home. Since the year before, my lord. 20. He nods slowly. He's still looking at the window. His face from the side is the same face. Lean, sharp, grey now all over, and not only at the sides, the narrow mouth, the eyes. But the eyes are not going click, click, click. They are still. You've never seen them still. You did their linen, he says, both of them, before I... He stops. Before. Yes, my lord. Was there ever... And he stops again, and you understand, with a cold that goes down through you the way it did on the trough 16 years ago, that the Earl of Wiltshire, Lord Privy Seal, father of a queen and a viscount and a woman who would rather beg, is about to ask the wash girl whether there was ever a mark. He does not ask it. He sits with his mouth a little open and the question in it, and he does not let it out. And you stand with the basket of his clean shirts on your hip, and you do not answer it. Because that is the trade. Because that is what the house pays for. Because somebody has to be the moat. On the press, my lord, you say. I'll put them on the press. You cross the gallery. You put the shirts on the press by the far wall. You come back. He has not moved. At the door you stop, and you do not know why, and you say the only true thing you have ever said to a member of that family in 16 years. She was very clean, my lord, always, cleaner than any of them. And you go out and shut the door. 2 years later the Countess comes home from court to die, and dies in the spring of 38, in the west wing, in the room with the middle window, and her linen comes down at the end, and it is so clean it might have been washed already, and you wash it anyway. And the year after that the Earl follows her, in March, in the same room, and lies in the little church across the moat under a brass that shows him in his garter robes, with his beautiful hands pressed together, and Mary is not at the burial, and nobody expects her, and the king, who has by then buried a third wife and is looking about him for a fourth, takes Hever for the crown, and gives it the following summer, with a stroke of his pen, to the fourth wife, whom he has just put away as part of her settlement. A German lady with a plain, kind face, who comes down under the arch in the autumn of 40 with her German women, and stands in the wet court and looks up at the west wing and says something in her own tongue that her interpreter renders as, "It is very small and very green." She keeps you on. She keeps most of the household on. She's a kind lady and pays her servants on the day, and never, in 17 years, asks you one question about the family that had the house before, though she sleeps in the middle room and must wonder. You're 33 when she comes. You marry Hal the next spring. It surprises nobody but the two of you. He has the stables now. You have the wash house. You have a room off the court instead of the loft, and Tibby has the loft and cries no more and shakes a new girl awake in the dark with her hand on her shoulder once. Mary dies in 43, in Essex at Rochford, in her bed, of nothing in particular, with her soldier and her children round her. You hear it from a carrier. You go up on the gatehouse leads that evening, which you may, now, be in the head laundress and Hal's wife, and nobody's business, and you stand in the wind and look south at the Weald going blue, and you think of the horse in the crimson rank and the hands gone white on the reins, and you say out loud to nobody, "Well, you got out, and you go down. You live a long time." That is the strange thing when you think of that house. You outlive all of them. You're in the wash house with Tibby's girl on the paddle in the November of 58 when the bells start. Not Hever's. Edenbridge's 2 miles off, thin on the wind, and then Chiddingstone's and then Penshurst's, all the parishes going one after another up the valley like a fire in a hedge. And Hal comes in from the stable with his cap in his hands and his old face wet and says, "The Queen's dead, Mary, and it's the girl, Elizabeth. It's the Lady Elizabeth is Queen. The girl. The one born at Greenwich with the small bonfires. The one whose mother went under the Frenchman's sword when she was 2.5. The one that solemn Catherine Carey asked you about in the court. Is she the King's? And you said, she's the Queen's mistress. You stand at the copper with the steam coming up. You're 51. Your hands are Mistress Jones's hands now, entirely. The fingers gone, the shine all over, and the girl on the paddle is staring at you the way Hal stared at you across a tablecloth 36 years ago. And you think, they will say it, now, in the passages to her back every day of her life, whose daughter she is, what her mother was, what was said in the tower about the brother. It will follow her the way the manors followed Mary, and the letters followed Anne, and there will not be a house in England where the underneath does not know it, and nobody says. And she will be queen anyway, for a very long time. And Catherine Carey will stand at her right hand as the first of her women, and Henry Carey, the boy from the cradle, will be made a baron before the year is out, and will carry her standard, the king's children by the first sister, standing guard over the king's child by the second, and nobody, in the whole of that long reign, will ever once say the sum out loud. The trade is done. The father is dead in his brass. Both daughters are in the ground, and the thing he sold, the thing that was bought and the thing that could not be, has come out the other side of all of it, and it is a girl with red hair and her grandfather's eyes, going click, click, click over the whole of England. Keep stirring, you say to the girl on the paddle. It doesn't stop for bells. She keeps stirring. You do not go to London for the crowning. You're too old, and it is January, and the roads are what they are. But that night, when the house is quiet and Hal is asleep and the copper is cold, you go to the chest at the foot of the bed and take out the thing at the bottom of it, under the winter blankets, wrapped in a clean cloth, and you unwrap it and hold it up in the rushlight. A shift. Fine Holland. Black work at the neck done in Flanders. The cuffs frayed to threads. It smells after 25 years of nothing at all, or of the chest, or of you. For the hands, she said, you'd know. You do not know. You have never known. You have turned it over for 25 years, and you do not know whether she meant it as thanks, or as a question, or as the only thing she had to give that had not been counted, or whether she was simply a woman on the night before her crowning, who remembered a girl on a stair with cracked knuckles and wanted once to put something clean into someone's hands that would not be taken back. You fold it, you wrap it, you put it in the chest, you never look at it again. Tomorrow the copper, tomorrow the lie. Tomorrow Tibby's girl will get the fire lit on the second strike or the third, and Hal will bring the water in, slower than he used to, and the sheets will come down from the German lady's chamber, the middle window, clean as ever, and you will put them in and stir and hang them on the hedge, and the swans will turn on the moat, the same as today, the same as 30 years ago, the same as all the days behind you and the ones left. But tonight you are only tired. Your hands ache, not the sharp ache of lie day, but the deep one, the one that lives in the bone now and does not go with tallow. Your shoulders are rounded from the paddle. Your knees crack when you go down to the fire. Your back, one side warm and one side cold, all your life. You lie down beside Hal. The rushlight gutters. The room goes dark, soft and complete, and there is only the small square of the window with the moon on the moat behind it, and the sound of the water, still, and the house standing up out of it. You think of Mistress Joan on the pallet. Somebody's got to be the moat. You have been the moat. For 38 years, everything went in you. The shift and the salt, the sweat and the sheets, the letters and the boots, the father's question that he did not ask, the brother's small hands in the cold trough, the crimson lady's white knuckles, the Frenchman's sword that you did not see, and the girl in the white litter that you did. And you sat there, still, and said nothing, and the house stood up. Whether it was a thing to be sorry for, you have not decided. You thought you would decide by now. You have not. But you know this. You put your hand on Tibby's arm, the third night, in the dark, and on Tibby's girl's. You said, I've seen it, child. That is not the trade. That is the other thing. And it is not nothing either. Your eyes are heavy. Your hands in the dark have stopped shaking. They stopped years ago. Centuries will pass. The house will stand. That is the strange part. Hever will stand, small and grey and green in its valley, long after the people who counted in it are dust. Other families will have it, and let it rot, and an American with more money than the Earl ever dreamed of will buy it and mend it and fill it with things that may or may not have been the Boleyns. People will come from the other side of the world and stand in the wet court and look up at the middle window and say her name. They will say her name, not the father's, not the sister's, not yours. They will walk through the rooms and look at the bed and the prayer book and the portraits with the long necks and the black eyes, and they will not go down to the wash-house, because the wash-house will be gone, and they will not think about the lie or the coal trough or the salt or the girl with her back to the wall pretending not to know. And that is right. That is the trade. The moat does not have a name, but somebody washed it, all of it. Every shift, every sheet, every sweated pillow slip, everything that house did and would not say. Somebody put it in the pot and stirred it and hung it out and folded it and never looked at it again. And the house stood up. Some things don't change. There is always a house. There's always a father who counts. There's always something that has to go in the trough, cold first, and be held under, and come out clean, and be folded and put away and never spoken of. And there is always somebody below the stairs, in the wet, with their hands cracked and their eyes on the wall, who knows. The knowing doesn't change. The hands don't change. The need, at the end of the long day, for the copper to be cold and the room to be dark and the water outside to be still, that doesn't change either. So let it come. Let sleep take you the way it took Nan Geyer in her room off the court at Hever, with the moon on the moat and her husband's back warm against hers and her ruined hands open on the blanket nearly 500 years ago. Let the house go quiet. Let the water go still. Let the things you saw today, the ones you did not say, go into the trough and under and out of sight. They'll keep. They always keep. Cold first. You're tired enough, clean enough, quiet enough. You have a roof and a bed and the dark. That's more than a great many people in a great many houses have ever had. That's enough. Let your thoughts slow and soften and finally stop. Take the rest. You've earned it. Nobody counted it for you and nobody can take it back. Good night.